Hello, my name is Luis Gabriel Cuervo, and I am the Senior Advisor for Research, Promotion and Development at the Pan American Health Organization, Regional Office of the World Health Organization for the Americas. This recording reproduces the presentation that was delivered during a consultation and brainstorming session about clinical trial registry networks for Latin America and the Caribbean, in line with the ICTRP Database of the World Health Organization. The meeting took place in Washington, D.C. on April 27, 2010. This magnificent monument of Albert Einstein is located at the National Academy of Sciences, a few blocks from the offices of the Pan American Health Organization in Washington, D.C. And here, in the monument, there's a quote of Albert Einstein that's highlighted in this slide, and it's quite fitting for the topic of this presentation. To begin, I would like to acknowledge people and entities that came together to advance the contributions to the International Clinical Trial Registry platform of the World Health Organization, in this case for the Americas region. Organizing the brainstorming session and consultations required a good number of teleconferences with our colleagues in Geneva, with Birem in Sao Paulo, our facilitator Kila Kirsch, who helped us shape the agenda and the strategies that achieved good results during the meeting. It also required supporting contributions from other entities within PAHO and WHO, and the event was made possible thanks to the gracious collaboration and support of the Spanish Agency for International Cooperation and Development that provided funding for the implementation of PAHO's policy and research for health. I will lay out now my vision of what we want to achieve. I want to pause to mention that when we talk of registering clinical trials, it sounds like something cold and impersonal. It is easy to forget that the implications and benefits of this good practice involves and affects real people, people like us, people close to us. To convey this, I will try to present as a background to several of these slides some photographs that remind us of those involved. They picture trialists and researchers like those featured here from the Gorgas Institute in Panama. You will see also research project managers and patients who were randomized during clinical trials. It is important to keep in mind that we work for them, and that the importance of complying with the good practice of clinical trial registrations is a means towards an end of improving knowledge for better health and development. These images were provided by Jane Dempster, a prominent Australian photographer who is also champion for PAHO's research-related activities. During the presentation, I will take you through some guidance, summarize some things that are in place, tell you about where we want to go, and I will wrap up with some comments on what we might be missing. Let's begin with what is already in place. I will not dwell on the long list of developments that preceded. These are reflected in articles published by Davina Garcia and Tiki Pang in the past few years. Many calls have been made for clinical trial registration, and for many good reasons. Some of you in this room have published editorials and opinion papers on this regard during the past couple of decades. The next graph summarizes some events. I must, however, apologize if it misses some events or misrepresents some details, but overall, what it shows is that after 2004, great momentum was achieved. Some would consider that the paroxetine lawsuit instigated some of these events. You will see how professional organizations and international groups, represented here in pink, or WHO and the PAHO developments, represented here in blue, and advocate networks in green and countries in red, have moved forward with clinical trial registration during the past 6 years. On this building of the Pan American Health Organization headquarters, Ministers of Health agreed and approved on a policy on research for health for the region that was approved in 2009. It includes specific calls to strengthen clinical trial registration in line with the proposed standards of the World Health Organization, what we call the ICTRP. Here at PAHO, we are leading by example. There is a mandate to submit all clinical research to our Ethics Review Committee, and the committee requires registration of all approved clinical trial proposals. We have achieved a good number of partners and a critical mass in terms of partnerships, with primary registers being developed in countries that share challenges and needs as those that we have here in Latin America and the Caribbean. We have access to a one-stop shop that, like a Google site, allows people to easily find clinical trials captured from primary registers, allowing us to filter them according to different characteristics. This is the ICTRP database. We can therefore, and through this database, know what trials have been registered in a given country, which ones are currently recruiting participants, who the researchers are, the nature of the funding sources, and so on and so forth. This opens wonderful opportunities to learn about studies even when the results are not yet publicly available. And there is experience now with primary registers that work in languages other than English, because it is clear and self-evident that language is a barrier for clinical trial registration. Editors of medical journals were amongst the first to endorse trial registration, and they are strong advocates of this practice. Leading journals are publishing regular calls and updates on the topic. The Lancet just published this week a progress report on clinical trial registration in Africa, highlighting the need to move forward with strengthening research for children's health issues. In the Americas, we have the privileged situation of having the wonderful resource that is the Latin American and Caribbean Center on Health Sciences Information that we all know as BIDEMI. It has developed a powerful methodology to implement virtual health libraries on specific topics or country collections, and an evidence portal that is a one-stop shop for evidence sources. An index of regional publications with abstracts in multiple languages called LILACs, and a thesaurus of medical subject headings that includes public health topics available in Spanish, English, and Portuguese. We also have a collection of evidence summaries that includes full free access to wonderful resources, including the Cochrane Library in Spanish and English, throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. In addition to this, BIDEMI offers a collection of full-text journals called Cielo, and both LILACs and Cielo affiliated journals have agreed also to require clinical trial registration since 2006. A year later, we began moving forward with proposals to develop a primary register for the region and a common software that would allow the development of national clinical trial registers in compliance with WHO's standards. This would reduce duplication and facilitate consistency and compatibility, as countries would have from the outset a platform that with an open source code software would allow adaptations. Therefore, we would facilitate that countries could share compatible platform and still be able to have register that or a database that allows them to fulfill their own needs. We have faced some blips in moving forward, but the time has come now to push ahead and make clinical trial registration across the Americas a standard. So what is that we want to achieve? What is that we want to aim for? Well, we want every clinical trial in the Americas to count. We want to see them considered, these clinical trials, in systematic reviews. We want equal opportunities to access registration in this region. We want a researcher in Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, or Belize to have the same opportunities to register as a researcher in the United States, Canada, Brazil, Cuba, or Argentina. We want to avoid duplication and work in the best spirit of Pan-Americanism That spirit that has allowed us to join forces and to do great things, like eradicating polio, and more recently rubella, or developing great resources like Viremi. We need to bring that spirit to work on trial registration, achieving efficiencies, sharing resources, and collaborating so that we can build efficiencies in our own processes and have the best possible standards and have from the outset data that can be shared and fed into the ICTRP database of the World Health Organization. We want to promote through clinical trial registration better governance of research for health. As frequently said, no data, no problem, no action. But with good clinical trial registration, we will be better suited to determine if research for health priorities are being cared for and what resources are available or invested in this type of research. This will allow a more strategic approach towards research and lead to action. And the returns of research will likely be more visible. Just to illustrate the potential benefits of having data, and you see some listed on the right, let me share with you two quick searches done in the ICTRP database. Oh, sorry, when I say on the right, it's on the left of this slide. I was able to quickly find out that there are 30 registered ongoing trials currently recruiting patients in Guatemala, and 35 clinical trials in kids in Chile recruiting participants. Let's just imagine that all that could be achieved in a if the database had could be achieved if the database had an accurate representation of clinical trials in the region that was publicly available. We could spend hours dreaming here, but the following three graphs may give you some insights into the opportunities that this would bring in terms of new knowledge generated. These maps are from the Worldmapper and illustrate some data about scientific research. We would be able to get better data and more specific data about clinical trials of what is going on in the region and the world for clinical trial registration. Furthermore, data could be used to fit time series, like the one here on the right side of the slide. It was taken from Gapminder, a software solution led by Hans Rosling that offers a wealth of organized data that can be turned into graphs and time series. The image you see here, for example, represents the reduction of total fertility and mortality for kids under 5 years of age in the past 60 years. Graphs like this one have been fantastic, generating new knowledge and showing how we need to adjust our definitions and estimates. Other software pieces can illustrate interactions within networks. Just imagine the potential if we had data of researchers from the Americas and the impact this could have in addressing topics through multicentric studies, for example. You could quickly identify expert group networks and learn about how these work between them. But let's now come back to the reality, because we have some elements that are missing, and we need them to fulfill these dreams and opportunities. Despite all the experience accrued, the dialogue, the momentum, and the support gained, the reality is that currently non-English speaking researchers struggle to get the research registered. What seems an obvious instruction or requirement for an English speaker may appear as an insurmountable or discouraging requirement for a Spanish or Portuguese speaking researcher trying to register a proposal in existing databases. Some databases have high fees, and even though they may reduce them or even waive them from researchers from low and middle income countries, the fact is that a negotiation is required, and an explicit request has to be made, and this remains a problem and a barrier. We need an accessible register for non-English speaking people who want to register in a database that fits into the International Clinical Trial Registry platform of the World Health Organization database. We need to get those working in setting up national registers to do it in coordination, sharing tools and standards. Our member states need help with information and indicators relevant to this issue, and key stakeholders need to be identified. Ultimately, We need a strategic approach that leads to accurate representation of clinical trials from the Americas in the International Clinical Trial Registry platform. Hence, we need to figure out several things. Like, for example, the setting up of a functional advisory board or boards, the understanding of what countries in the region need. We need tools to address different needs in a way that promotes equal opportunities for clinical trial registration. And we need to find out resources to develop and maintain an accessible primary register for the region, especially when registers are servicing those most in need. That is why we call upon you today to help us brainstorm and come with ideas for a strategy that gets regional support, to provide your thoughtful recommendations for establishing a regional network that helps us define aims for the short, medium, and long term, and to advise us on choices for managing data and establishing sustainable processes. For example, we have dilemmas on whether data cleaning and translation to comply with the ICTRP standards should be done at the country level or centrally. Because one approach promotes appropriation, the other approach brings efficiencies and overall lower costs. We therefore seek your advice today to continue this journey on the correct path. So thank you so much for joining this brainstorming and consultation, and welcome to Washington, D.C.